NaNoWriMo, the nonprofit behind National Novel Writing Month, is shutting down officially. If you don't know who I am, my name is Andrea, the word engineer, a former engineer turned freelance book editor and aspiring author living in Mexico. So let's get right into this video. As you saw by the title of the video, NaNoWriMo is officially shutting down. So we're going to get into the reason behind it. We're going to look at the article and look at the official video. So let's get right into it. All right, so I have the article pulled up for you all by The Guardian. Let's get right into it. Scandal hit creative writing website NaNoWriMo to close after 20 years. The NaNoWriMo, the US-based nonprofit organization that challenged people to write a novel in a month, has announced it is closing down after 20 years. NaNoWriMo, an abbreviation of National Novel Writing Month, fostered an online community of participants aiming to write 50,000 words of fiction in November. It began informally in 1999 before becoming a nonprofit in 2006. Each year, tens of thousands signed up to the organization's flagship program. On Monday, NaNoWriMo announced its closure to community members via email. A 27 minutes YouTube video posted the same day by the organization's interim executive director, Kelby Blades, explained that it had to close due to ongoing financial problems, which were compounded by reputational damage. In November 2023, several community members complained to the nonprofit's board, Blades said. They believed that staff had mishandled accusations made in May of 2023 that a NaNoWriMo forum moderator was grooming children on a different website. So I've never participated in NaNoWriMo, but I did hear about this scandal, being that I'm a freelance book editor. NaNoWriMo is a huge organization, so I've definitely heard about it. I've never participated, but I did hear about this scandal. And there was another one last year when they started to incorporate AI, which I'm sure the article would talk about as well. So let's continue. The moderator was eventually removed, though this was for unrelated code of conduct violations and occurred many weeks after the initial complaints. Ooh, that's sus. In the wake of this, community members came forward with other complaints related to child safety on the NaNoWriMo sites. The organization was also widely criticized last year over a statement on the use of artificial intelligence in creative writing, which I just mentioned. After stating that it did not support or explicitly condemn any approach to writing, including the use of AI, it said that the categorical condemnation of artificial intelligence had classist and ableist undertones. It went on to say that not all writers have the financial ability to hire humans to help at certain phases of their writing, and that not all brains have same abilities. There is a wealth of reasons why individuals can't see the issues in their writing without help. Fantasy author C.L. Polk said at the time that Nano is basically asserting that disabled people don't have what it takes to create art when they trot out the lie that scorning AI is ableist. Though the AI controversy received widespread press coverage, Blades' video primarily focused on child safety concerns. She said that NaNoWriMo's position on AI had been covered, frankly so inaccurately. The organization's closure will cause no small amount of grief, said Blades. NaNoWriMo will keep its websites live for as long as possible so that people can take what they want from their accounts, but did not specify a date when the sites would shut down. We hold no belief that people will stop writing 50,000 words in November, read Monday's email. Many alternatives to NaNoWriMo popped up this year, and people did find each other. In so many ways, it's easier than it was when NaNoWriMo began in 1999 to find your writing tribe online. So let's just do a quick. Thought I had it open already. See if the site is still active. Looks like it's still active. You can still, if you have an account, You can still take what you need to take from the account while it's still available. So yeah, if there is information on your account that you want to get, definitely do that ASAP. Okay, so let's get into the YouTube video. So I have the video, pulled up for you all. It wasn't posted on their official YouTube channel, which is interesting. Let me just do a quick search. Let's see. Yeah, so this is their official, pause that. This is their official YouTube channel, NaNoWriMo. They have over 43,000 subscribers. Yeah, I wonder why they didn't post it on there. That's interesting. But anyway, let's go back and let's check out the video.
Hey there, this is Kilby Blade speaking. I'm the Interim Executive Director of National Novel Writing Month, here to share the state of the organization. I apologize for the time it's taken to pull this together, though as you'll see, there is a lot of information here.
All right, I'm going to see if I can speed this up a bit.
It's essentially impossible to understand where NaNoWriMo is right now without giving some context, and talking about things that the organization historically chose not to discuss. Over the years, most of the communications that were sent out focused on the spirit of the event and didn't talk much about what it took to run the organization. Bear with me as I try to explain not just what the state of NaNoWriMo is, but also why. Before we dive into some financial context, I'll mention that I've been the interim executive director since December of 2023. Before that, I was a board member. I originally joined the board in the spring of 2022. NaNoWriMo itself started informally 25 years ago in 1999. It became a nonprofit in 2006 and grew into a global phenomenon with tens of thousands of official participants each season. Our mailing list alone has more than 500,000 subscribers and very high engagement rates. By any standard, this is a community with tremendous worldwide reach. When people come across communities as large and as old as ours, they assume that we must be well-funded. Even when I joined the board in 2022, I figured we must be getting 5- and 6-figure support from big publishers, big authors, and other big fans of what we do. But NaNoWriMo never had that level of financial backing, and with a budget of only about $1.3 million a year, we are on the smaller side for a nonprofit. As you can see from these numbers, NaNoWriMo operated at a budget deficit for 4 of the past 6 years, which means it wasn't netting enough in donations and other income to support itself. During those years, cash reserves were drawn from to make up for budget shortfalls. And when cash reserves jumped up again in 2020, that was due to a $150,000 COVID relief loan that was taken out by previous leadership. Without that loan, the organization would have operated at a deficit for 5 out of the past 6 years, rather than 4. Most nonprofits that are struggling to this degree and that experience prolonged difficulties go to their communities with candor about the seriousness of their situation. But if you look back at the fundraising messages that went out to our community over this period, there was very little signaling that the organization was in distress. Another indicator of an organization's financial health is its funding sources. Most nonprofits are primarily funded by donations, but for years, NaNoWriMo has received the majority of its revenue from merchandise and sponsorships, more than 50%. The community size really matters here because, again, if you have hundreds of thousands of people engaging with us every year, which is a truly massive number for any community, but the organization itself is bringing in just over $1 million, that's a pretty big sign of distress. And if you look at the trend over time, the organization was becoming more dependent on funding sources other than donations. Individual giving fell in recent years, and merchandise sales and sponsorships were boosted to compensate for that. The final piece of the financial picture is how little of the organization's funding was going to program expenses and technology. The organization only spent 8.7% of its total budget on both. For anybody who does NaNoWriMo every year, you know that we have our share of technical problems and that our website looks and functions like it was built years ago, which it was. Our last major technology upgrade was 7 years ago, in 2018. Chronic underinvestment in both our NaNoWriMo and our Young Writers Program websites have made both sites hard to maintain and near their breaking points. So to recap, the organization was operating at a deficit for many years. It was primarily funded by sponsorships and merchandise and not by charitable contributions. And it didn't have the sustainability mechanisms you would hope to see, like an endowment, a critical mass of major donors, or a reliable set of foundation grants.
So I just want to read this really quick. So why is all of this important? By October 2023, NaNoWriMo had steadily depleted most of its cash reserves. The board was intensely focused on fundraising in 2022 and 23. I wonder if fundraising was hindered because of the alleged child endangerment that took place in May of 2023, like we read in the article. Say, supported the former ED's request to hire a full-time development director, underway with additional fundraisers that could be run by the board. For example, an auction, underway with the 25th anniversary planning, and recognize a need to build a board that could support on the fundraising side.
As early as 2020, NaNoWriMo was taking on six-figure debt to fund its operating expenses, debt which it still holds. By the time I arrived as interim executive director in December of 2023, only a very small portion of that COVID loan had been repaid over the course of 3.5 years, and the organization had accumulated additional debt. So what was being done about all of this? During my time on the board, we were focused on what we should have been focused on, which was fundraising. In early 2022, the board approved a new full-time position for a director of community fundraising that was 100% dedicated to bringing in new donations. The board was actively working on an online auction that was supposed to launch in November of 2023. We were strategizing festivities for NaNoWriMo's 25th anniversary, and were hoping to do literary salons, as well as a mega fundraiser in 2024 for our anniversary. Also, the board was extremely small in 2022 and 2023, so we were focused on board recruitment. Then, serious complaints were brought directly to the board in November of 2023 during National Novel Writing Month. Several members of the community reported that specific staff members had mishandled a child endangerment complaint. The accusers had told staff back in May of 2023 that a moderator was grooming children on a different website, as in not on NaNoWriMo. Based on their own speculation, they asked for the moderator to be removed from our site. The staff in question eventually removed the moderator, but for unrelated code of conduct violations, and not until many weeks after the initial complaints. The board investigated the matter and concluded that the staff should have acted differently, not only in its response to the complaint, but also in its failure to disclose such a serious matter to the board. After the initial accusations of child endangerment due to mismanagement of our volunteer moderators were waged, members of the community stepped forward with more concerns. For example, the board was shown how, on our Young Writers Program website, anybody could create an educator account and invite students to their classroom. Others approached the board, saying they had raised previous child endangerment concerns to staff that they felt had gone unaddressed. So, what did we discover about NaNoWriMo's child safety practices in November of 2023, while I was still a member of the board? We discovered that staff had never been subjected to criminal background checks, despite NaNoWriMo being a youth-facing organization. We discovered that even though we had an all-ages policy on our main NaNoWriMo site and a dedicated Young Writers program with its own website, none of our staff or our 800 volunteers had completed state-mandated child safety training. We discovered that staff had not subjected volunteers to formal applications that required them to give us their legal name, address, phone numbers, or any verified identifying information.
Sheesh, that sounds like so many red flags. No background checks, no state mandated child safety training, and you don't even know who the volunteers are. That just sounds like a recipe for a disaster. Sheesh.
That's important because when the board got involved with accusations made against the moderator and contacted the FBI's National Center for Missing or Exploited Children in order to understand what we should do in this situation, we were asked who this volunteer was, but we literally could not tell the authorities the legal identity of this person. The organization
What?
didn't keep those kinds of records. So,
Sheesh.
based on all of this, it was clear that there was work that had to start immediately, and that there had to be a leadership change. By December of 2023, less than a month after the complaints were brought to light, I voluntarily resigned from the board and came in on a 6-month contract basis to be the interim executive director. The idea was to bring in someone who understood youth-facing organizations, who had experience with the required state-mandated training. My other talents were also desirable. Given the organization's financial problems, formal business and fundraising experience was a major reason why I had been recruited to the board. Our top priority is, and was, child safety. That meant that, in addition to keeping the organization and all of its services going, we had to commit to several new projects. And we did some amazing work. First and foremost, we implemented staff background checks. That started immediately in December of 2023. In 2024, we ended our policy.
So they started in 1999, and the first time they did background checks was in 2023. Whew, out of control.
Of all ages spaces, and we did the back-end technical work to make it so that there was one set of permissions and discoverability if you were an adult, and a completely different set if you were a minor. We shut down features that were potentially dangerous to minors, mainly in relation to how minors were able to craft their bios and whether they were able to reveal their locations. We developed advice content to help minors understand how to protect their safety online. On the Young Writers Program, we started verifying that people who said they were educators were actually educators, and we developed materials and guidelines for teachers around safety. We laid the groundwork for a legally compliant volunteer program that included all of the necessary child safety training. Our second priority is what I'll call truth and moderation.
So let me just read this one. So, truth and moderation, being clear about what we could and should have moderated. Communicating and rectifying false affiliations where the organization did not moderate, scores of Discord servers, Facebook groups, and other accounts bearing our trademark. Spaces where NaNoWriMo staff had no official role or presence. Spaces that were causing confusion in the community and labor for our help desk staff. Pausing programs where satisfactory moderation could not be achieved. All volunteer-driven programs and website features pending compliance overhaul. The NaNoWriMo forums pending child safety reforms. Anchoring to mission-driven thinking around how our spaces should be used. Backed away from trying and failing to be everything to every writer by letting our spaces be about anything and everything any user wanted it to be. Moving toward moderating in a way that honored the scope of our mission.
Remember, the second complaint that the board received was about staff moderation practices. Our official spaces, including our forums, were being moderated inconsistently, not only by staff, but also by volunteers. Our codes of conduct were outdated and insufficient, and weren't being followed widely enough. Even though most people were participating with common sense civility, and even though great discussions were happening in some spaces, some of the behavior we saw was not only problematic, but unaddressable, given how it was being managed at that time. So part of the decision to pause the forums was about needing to regroup in the name of child safety. But it was also us knowing that not enough had been done to maintain the integrity of the space itself. And to be clear, this is a common problem that a lot of organizations have. In fact, if you look at other large community-driven forums that have been around as long as ours have, like Wattpad or IMDb or PlayStation, most of them shut down years ago because they're expensive to maintain and hard to moderate. Our final problem with moderation was that we had encouraged a practice of RIMOs who were not employees of the organization to set up Discord servers, Facebook groups, and other offshoots with the NaNoWriMo name, mainly because our own website didn't have the kinds of social features that other apps offered and that our community wanted. The problem was, nobody under NaNoWriMo's authority was actually moderating those groups. In addition to the legal implications that created for the organization, NaNoWriMo was using its resources to deal with help desk complaints about incidents that were happening in these outside groups. All of this led to some bigger internal conversations about our mission and the consequences of trying to be everything to everyone, and how, instead of being intentional about ways that we could serve our mission excellently through 2 or 3 core program features, we were trying to operate with dozens of program features and doing all of them badly without a clear strategic plan in place. Needless.
Okay, so they had some feedback, it looks like, from the volunteers, it seems like. Um, so this first set of volunteers is the You're Running NaNoWriMo camp. NaNoWriMo was great, and you're running everything that was great about it. Maybe that should be ruining, perhaps. NaNoWriMo was great, and you're ruining everything that was great about it, I think. You're making too many changes too fast without community feedback. You don't run NaNoWriMo. We, the volunteers, do, and you need to let us run it. Okay. And then we have the next group of volunteers that thank you for making these necessary changes. So they seem like they were more appreciative. Of course, child safety has to come first. Thanks for keeping young writers safe. NaNoWriMo has been declining for years and has a lot of problems that need fixing. We, the volunteers, understand why you're rebuilding. We'll be here when you need us again. And then the last batch of volunteers, the somewhere in between camp. All of this has caused me to lose a lot of trust in NaNoWriMo. You have to win back my trust.
Needless to say, all of this was met with mixed reactions. Some of our community has been participating in NaNoWriMo for 10 or even 20 years, and the number of people who view themselves as experts by virtue of how long they've been doing NaNoWriMo or how long they've been volunteering numbers in the tens of thousands. There was definitely a sense of, just listen to us, we know what we're talking about, among people who were frustrated with the decisions that were being made at headquarters. But there was also a sense of relief among a different set of long-timers who felt that problems had been brewing for years and wanted to see them addressed. A third group of people had heard about the child endangerment accusations and were shocked and disappointed and wanted us to focus on that. One big criticism that some people had of the organization was that we were slow to make simple changes and that we weren't delivering fast enough on promises we'd made in 2023. What people probably didn't know is that by January and February, a host of other issues came to light. In total, there were more than a dozen existing labor violations when I came on board. They were serious enough to warrant being dealt with immediately. Some of them, if further ignored, could have placed our nonprofit status at risk. The other thing I discovered was a level of financial crisis and disarray that hadn't been apparent to me as a board member. The board sees very high-level financial statements, but digging even one or two layers deeper exposed some serious problems. There was other information that I learned once I came inside that I hadn't been privy to as a board member. During my time on the board, the declining numbers in our participation were described to me as deflation from the COVID bubble. I had never been shown numbers prior to 2020 or seen the longer range, but when I came on as interim ED and looked farther back at our numbers, I saw a very different trend and started to develop a very different understanding of what was really happening within the org. Participation had been declining for much, much longer than I knew, and this new information warranted board discussion. It soon became very clear that the interim ED job was bigger than rebuilding after a reputational crisis. NaNoWriMo had a litany of other problems that had been neglected. It was much bigger than a crisis of confidence and the list of operational fixes the board had committed to. So much more had to be addressed, and a lot needed to happen in order to pull all of the necessary changes off.
So, what needed to happen? So, pertaining to the financial crisis, a great fundraising year in Q4 2023 and a blockbuster year in 2024 to bring the organization to baseline. Year one plus long-term budget for child safety. Year one plus long-term budget to phase out staff issues. Significant investment in building financial stability. The next problem area, crises of confidence. Transparency of board findings and board action. Tangible improvement to child safety, tangible improvements to other legal and compliance issues, clarity of vision moving forward. And the last problem area, program crises, long road of relationship repair dating back to tensions in 2018, the need to address tech and obvious reasons for program attrition, and strategic vision to address program stability and modernization problems. So what actually happened? Financial crises 2023 fundraising was 245,000 lower than projected. Sponsorship revenue dropped from 310K in March 2023 to about 125K in March 2024. By Q2 2024, some previous foundation donors abandoning the organization. In 2024, merchandise sales were a fraction of what they were the previous years. That could be due to AI. I wonder if that was due to AI, because that's when they incorporated the controversy with including AI in 2024. So I wonder if those donors and the merchandise sales dropping were the cause of that, you know? So the problem area, crisis of confidence, achieved our goal of remediating child endangerment threats, harder to overcome community trauma over big sudden changes. Some changes were legally necessary, obviously. It was necessary for both operational and compliance reasons to draw boundaries around our mission. And last program crises, a ton of people still wanted to do NaNoWriMo, a ton of people remained engaged.
Financially, we took immediate hits. The child endangerment complaints had come forth in November 2023, the time of year when we do the most fundraising, and the organization was already not slated to meet its annual fundraising projections at that time. When all was said and done, 2023 brought in about $245,000 less than what was projected, nearly 20% of the organization's annual budget. By March of 2024, sponsorships had dropped by $185,000. By the second quarter, most of our previous foundation donors abandoned the organization. At this point, the financial cost of our 2023 reputational damage was starting to become clear. We put some irons in the fire on the fundraising front, and we're going after some grants and some major gifts. At one point, we were in serious talks about merging with a different writing organization, and we were working diligently to solve the organization's compliance and program problems in the hopes that we would earn back our community's support. And the crisis of confidence was the hardest part. The big sudden changes felt traumatic to a lot of people, and we understood why people were upset, because there hadn't been very many boundaries before. In a lot of ways, it had been a total free-for-all. But the stark reality was that we were operating outside of our mission in ways that were causing explicit problems. A lot of things that some people thought we should be, from an industry water cooler willing to host discussions on any topic, to an advocacy group that actively lobbied for authors, had nothing to do with completing a 50,000-word writing challenge or helping people cultivate personal creativity and meet individual writing goals. The final thing that actually happened in 2024 is that people did show up to do NaNoWriMo. Though our number of official participants continued on its multi-year downward trend, we still had a lot of engagement. Our email list size stayed the same, so did our email opens. Our click engagement actually went way up, and a lot of people still donated to the org. Has our progress been enough? Can NaNoWriMo be financially viable from a fundraising perspective? Can it maintain programs that meet the new standards we've had to build? Does it have enough community interest and community engagement to justify its existence long term? Does it have the capacity to overcome its history? The long-term answer to all of these things is undeniably yes. Unfortunately, we just don't have the financial runway to build the ecosystem NaNoWriMo needs. The problems at this moment are just too long-standing and too big. The organization has held six-figure debt since 2020. We saw a $360,000 of our projected income, around 30% of our annual budget, disappear in the direct aftermath of November of 2023, and our best efforts to bring in new funding sources in 2024 could not compensate for those losses.
All right, let's read this. What's next for NaNoWriMo? After years of financial struggles, including budget deficits for 4 of the past 6 years, NaNoWriMo can no longer continue as a nonprofit. We will keep the website live for as long as possible with no hard end dates. We can no longer commit to moderation of any of our social spaces and are likely to turn off comments. We can no longer commit to help ticket support, though we will do our best to publish new FAQs. Most efforts at this point is going toward responsibly dismantling the organization.
After 6 years of severe financial problems and an unexpected crisis coming in at the very moment when we needed to have an extraordinary year, NaNoWriMo.org has no choice but to shut down. I'll tell you why there are no good alternatives in a minute. We will keep our websites up for as long as possible so that people can take what they want from their accounts, but we're not guaranteeing a specific end date. They'll stay up for as long as we can afford to keep them there. We also can't commit to moderating any of our spaces or to providing technical support. The organization is running completely on the efforts of the volunteers who we did vet this year. And this is where I should tell you that I have been unpaid since the end of May, and that has to be mentioned as well. Quite a number of people who have worked on NaNoWriMo in recent months have, like me, been completely unpaid and have put in significant time in the name of saving the organization. We wish that we could provide more support, but in addition to our team being exhausted after an extremely trying year, we're simply not in that position. And a fair bit of effort at this point will go to the responsible dismantling of the organization. Again, shutting down clearly wasn't a first choice. We did a lot this year to look for creative alternatives and to make some big asks that we hope would allow the organization to pull through. I mentioned earlier that we were in talks about merging with another major writing organization, and those talks deteriorated once they found out about NaNoWriMo's debt. NaNoWriMo is not an attractive merger prospect right now. We also talked to other potential supporters who wanted to see the organization survive, but some of those allies were pretty taken aback by the community dynamic they were seeing on places like Reddit. A lot of people who had a view of the NaNoWriMo community as a welcoming community had that view challenged this year. And it wasn't because of what HQ was doing, but because of what they were seeing from people who were self-identified Rhymos. Numerous people who either withheld their support or supported us anonymously told us that the tone of the community itself was a big issue. Another thing that happened this year is that after we were covered so widely in the press, and frankly so inaccurately about our position on artificial intelligence, a number of AI companies approached us with an interest in sponsorship. It's fair to say that we saw enough interest from AI companies that accepting their sponsorship would have bought the organization some time. But despite what people might think about our position on AI, we concluded that most of the new players that approached us would not be fitting sponsors, because what their apps did went against our mission. But the real alternative to the organization closing, and I can't say this enough, would have been for us to have been funded by the community. We have a large enough community that funding a $1.3 million budget should never have been a problem. We were hoping that if we spoke more candidly about the organization's challenges, and that if we were simply open about our funding struggles, that it would yield a different result. But this was an objectively bad year to ask anybody in our community for money. and making over an inordinately weak funding program can't be achieved overnight. So I know what some of you are thinking. Could NaNoWriMo simply become more grassroots? I'm here to tell you it doesn't get more grassroots than the organization previously was. NaNoWriMo was a 12-person organization that had 800 volunteers doing the majority of the labor of the organization. It essentially was volunteer run, and no matter how many volunteers are helping you, organizations still need cash.
Okay, so what's next for NaNoWriMo, the community? Short answer, grief, which we don't take lightly. Beyond that, it's up to the community. Long answer, regardless of what the organization took credit for, NaNoWriMo has always had a life of its own. Many spaces where RIMOs historically gathered under the NaNoWriMo name have never been controlled by the organization, for example, the aforementioned Discord servers and Facebook groups. A number of alternative November events have sprung up in the past year. NaNoWriMo was a thing for 6 years before it became a nonprofit, and people will write in November regardless.
But the question of what's next for the organization as a legal nonprofit entity is very different from the question of what's next for actual RIMOs. And I'll stop to acknowledge that Nano's closure will cause no small amount of grief. I haven't used that word very much as part of this presentation, but I've used it a lot on other forums this year. Come November, NaNoWriMo as you have known it will no longer exist. And whether you love or hate NaNoWriMo at this moment, that's going to come with feelings. But just because this is the end of NaNoWriMo, the indebted nonprofit, we hold no belief that people will stop writing 50,000 words in November and seeking support for the journey they're on. In so many ways, it's a lot easier than it was when NaNoWriMo became a nonprofit in 2006 to find your writing tribe online. In fact, so many people were angry with NaNoWriMo this year that a ton of alternatives popped up. People did find each other, and they wrote in community without the help of the nonprofit. In 2024, many dissatisfied community members used NaNoWriMo.org to form separate communities, and we absolutely did not shut that down. To stop writers from finding community with other writers, regardless of their reasons, is antithetical to our mission. NaNoWriMo backlash in 2024 showed us firsthand how superfluous the organization itself might be, no matter how many of us, including me, wish it could still exist. I'll say a few things.
What we want organizers of future endeavors to know. Writing revisionist history about NaNoWriMo's closure does a disservice to future efforts and other arts nonprofits. Nonprofits need funding to survive. A years-long lack of funding is why NaNoWriMo could not weather recent challenges. I wonder if that was due to them incorporating AI. Other major arts nonprofits have shut down due to lack of funding in recent years. The services that you enjoy for free need your support because nothing is really free. Nonprofits need to address their problems. A 6-year downturn trend in participation was a clear sign that program changes were needed. There was a clear lack of investment in new tech and fresh program materials during this time. This is a logical outcome of long-standing circumstances, not a salacious tale of scandal that can be blamed on child endangerment accusations or AI.
That we really want organizers of future endeavors to know. And I'm saying this with absolute certainty that 5 minutes after this video is published, some people will blame the AI backlash we saw in September for NaNoWriMo's demise. To blame NaNoWriMo's demise on the events of the past year does a disservice to all struggling nonprofits. What hurt the organization far more and for far longer than any of those things was the fact that too many members of a very large, very engaged community let themselves believe the service we provided was free. Though we had tens of thousands of generous donors who carried the organizations over the years, and so many volunteers who funded perks out of their own pockets, people to whom all of us owe a debt of gratitude, the vast majority of this tremendous community simply didn't give. Believe me, I know that not everybody can give, and that many people stretched to give what they could. My statements now are not an indictment of a community that I feel should have done more. They are a plea for you to look at the free services you use through a different lens. Public radio is struggling. Even Sesame Workshop, which produces Sesame Street, is on the brink, and arts nonprofits are faring the worst right now. Citizens who use those services have an important role to play. And the final factor leading to NaNoWriMo's closure was NaNoWriMo itself. A 6-year downward trend in participation was a big red flag. More should have been done to earn back the loyalty of this community and to tangibly improve our program offering. Over the years, opportunities were missed. But that's not the note that I want to end on, because even more than I believe that this community is owed an explanation, I believe in the hundreds of thousands of you who are owed a thanks. For 25 years, you came together and did some truly extraordinary things, things that should not be obscured. I want to say thank you to the thousands of municipal liaisons, moderators, and other volunteers who held community for writers looking for a space, and who truly went above and beyond. These are people who were spending significant time every single day helping other writers, often while they were doing NaNoWriMo themselves. A lot of these folks spent money out of their own pockets to create amazing local events. Some of them even did grassroots fundraising on behalf of the organization. These are people who, in a lot of cases, served as the face of the organization and were an indispensable part of making this community what it is. Educators who brought NaNoWriMo to their classrooms and got young people to write. One of the most rewarding parts of my job during a pretty difficult year was hearing from educators who shared the impact that participating in NaNoWriMo had on their students. I also want to thank educators for totally and completely getting behind the organization in terms of improvements to its child safety practices. I want to thank the staff who truly cared about the organization and about the community and who worked every single day to make NaNoWriMo a fun place. And I want to honor the legacy of the people who really cared about carrying on the spirit of NaNoWriMo. I want to thank the many established authors and industry players who showed up every season to serve as pep talkers and camp counselors as well. I know something that early career writers struggle with is feeling legitimate, and I'm thankful for all of the contributions of people who gave early career writers the courage to step forward and write. This year, I've had a chance to get to know a lot of our sponsors, and I can tell you that the ones I work closely with really care a lot about writers. Many of them are storytellers themselves, and most of them were tremendous, and I mean years-long supporters of NaNoWriMo. To our extremely generous donors, and to be clear, I mean donors that gave at every level because any amount of money can be a stretch, I want to thank you for showing up for NaNoWriMo month after month, year after year, in the name of helping yourself and other Rhymos receive access to our platform and services. To participants who helped other participants informally, even if you didn't have an official role as a volunteer, thank you for sharing your encouragement and your advice. It was through small acts of kindness from writer to writer that the heart of this community showed itself every day. To Chris Beatty for cooking up this wild and wonderful idea that inspired so many people, I thank you. And to anybody and everybody who showed up for writing and was inspired by NaNoWriMo, honor yourself for all you've done, and don't forget to keep writing.
Whew, that was a lot. So yeah, I'll leave the link to that video in the description. So if you want to check out the video for yourself, you'll have the option to do so. Now we're going to check out Reddit to see what the people are talking about since NaNoWriMo is now shutting down. Okay, so I have one Reddit thread pulled up, which was just from a day ago. NaNoWriMo shut down after AI content moderation scandal. So people are always going to go with the scandal aspect versus the financial aspect, which was talked about in the video. So one person says if they support AI, they deserve to collapse. AI is the exact opposite of creativity. It takes diverse, interesting, and creative content, puts it in a blender, and spits out the mean. Degenerative AI can be useful, but it cannot be creative. Another user says if they were already struggling to stay solvent, they probably felt like AI was the death knell if they didn't find a way to live with it. Fight the losing battle against it or try to find a path forward, acknowledging it as a tool people are going to use and which they can't effectively police against in the long run. There's going to be AI fake version control soon enough. All right, I have another NaNoWriMo Reddit thread pulled up. NaNoWriMo officially shutting down. Let's read this first one. So it says, I'm saddened I owe much of my writing journey to NaNoWriMo, giving me the push to write that first complete novel-length project to prove to myself I could do it. Since 2014, I won NaNoWriMo 10 times in a row. Wow, that's quite a feat. I was active on the forums all through the November 23 scandal and had hopes that maybe the organization could pull through, only to watch it die a slow death withering on the vine. And so I'm sad that the organization that meant so much to my writer's story is never going to pull itself out of the muck it spent in this last year mired in. But I'm unsurprised it was deep in the muck. I suppose it's time to either look for an alternative or, more likely, now that I have a daily writing habit, to accept that I've grown beyond NaNoWriMo. Someone replied to the comment saying, "Thank you for putting into words what I was thinking. I joined in 2013 and similarly kept going up until all hope had faded. I have several mugs. I use them now on days I want to inspire myself to write. Nano might be gone, but I'm glad for the journey it started." Let's see. Another user says, "In 2023, I had my friend's mom make me a t-shirt quilt of all my participant and winners shirts." Oh, that's cute. "My cats love it and it's draped over the chase end of my couch. I have a couple of mugs too. Bittersweet is the right word. I took down the frame posters I had and tossed a bunch of my little swag, but I'm keeping the quilt and the mugs to remember the good years." It sounds like it definitely had a significant impact on a lot of writers. Um, One user says, "If you're looking to save your stats from the site, the TrackBear app has an import tool." Let's check this out. So trackbear.app. This is actually the first time I've ever heard of this. Oh, looking to import your NaNoWriMo project. Once you're logged in, go to projects, then import. Oh, so if you're a member of NaNoWriMo, it looks like you can start keeping track of all your progress with this particular app. If you haven't heard of it, it's my first time hearing of it. I'll drop this. If I don't drop it in the description, I'll drop this link in the comments as well. So be sure to check that out if you're interested in this particular app to track your writing progress. Let's see. Oh, so this is the official email. I won't go through the email since we read through the entire, or since we watched the whole entire video. I won't go through the long email that was sent. But let's see. Another user says, "I just got the email and ran here. Funny thing, I just made a new account yesterday." Wow. This was 2 days ago, mind you. So that was Monday. "I learned about this in 2012, and with my teenage depression and family struggles, I never revisited the idea of this challenge or community. I'm almost 30 and finally thought about NaNoWriMo. Went on Reddit and wow. The troubles and allegations and horrific history I read about. Now this, just wow. Sad and deserved. Crazy 24 hours I had. I even commented on their last IG post yesterday asking if this was still a thing. Sheesh." Oh, let's see what this person says. It seems to be a bit controversial. "Kelby killed it herself, and I hope no one listened to that garbage about funding." Whew. This one is not buying anything that was in that video. "It could have been saved if it hadn't been for her bull during the forum closures and ignoring everyone. I'll miss NaNoWriMo myself. Lots of memories over 10 years, and I hate Kelby pulled this. And now trying to play the victim card or blaming the community. We tried to help improve it. She destroyed it." So I imagine this individual, if they were a volunteer, they might be the one who was and then let us run the program in our own way. Let's see what this user says in reply. Honestly, when they found out that the nonprofit was in crisis, why would they bring on a board member as director when they should have done an external hire who could have actually managed a recovery? They hired someone who was already in the mess to clean it up when they should have found someone who could have actually done the job. I also thought it was really shady that in the video she mentions how they never kept track of it. I also thought it was really shady that in the video she mentions how they never kept track of actual name, but only the usernames. But she hasn't ever used her real name with us. Interesting. Honestly, I don't like that she helped ruin Nano, but she gets to live behind a pen name. Interesting. So another user says TrackBear is about to get a whole lot more popular. Gotta convert your nano progress before it's too late. So yeah, so it seems like people are really into this tracker app to track your progress. So be sure to check this out if that's something of interest to you. So that is the news. NaNoWriMo is closing its doors. It is officially shutting down. Like I said, I've never participated in the organization, but I know a lot of writers have participated to get that 50,000 words for their fiction novel. And as we saw in the Reddit comments, a lot of people are deeply saddened that the organization is shutting down. And some people are not so happy with the interim, I think it was executive director. They're not so happy with her and the role that she played there towards the end of the closing of the organization. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to my channel. I give writing tips for indie authors and just general topics about the book publishing industry. And if you're in need of an editor, I am a copy editor and proofreader, so feel free to check out my website. It's in my About Me page, and I will see you all in the next video.